Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Intercessions. I am so excited today to feature François-Xavier Poizat as my next guest. We are leaving the world of surgery and venturing into the world of music, which, of course, I am a bit biased against, but it is another great love of mine. So I'm very excited to talk to François today. François is a pianist with Swiss, French, and Chinese origins. He graduated from the Geneva and Hamburg Conservatory, from the Juilliard School in New York, and from the Accademia Nazionale di Santa Cecilia in Rome, with the teaching of Alexei Galavin, Yevgeny Korolyov, Nelson Gerner, Matti Rakelio, and Benedito Lupo, among others. It was no less than the famous Marta Argerich who propelled him on the international stage by inviting him when he was only 12 years old to the Pacific Music Festival in Japan, where she recognized his deep lyricism and remarkable virtuosity. This marked the beginning of a remarkable career for François that has brought him to perform in already 28 countries throughout Europe, Asia, and America, in venues like the Victoria Hall in Geneva, the Tonhalle in Zurich, the Konzerthaus and Philharmonie in Berlin, the Seoul Art Center, the Great Hall of the Moscow Conservatory, and Carnegie Hall here in New York City. He has collaborated with many around the world, with big orchestras, and continues to win prizes in significant competitions. He won the Grand Prix at the 2004 International Competition for the Youth in Kassel, the 2007 Young Soloist Prize at the Radio Francophone Publique, first prize at the 2009 International Competition for the Youth of Oldenburg, and at the 2009 Elise Meyer Competition in Hamburg in Germany. He was also awarded the Jury Special Prize at the 2011 Tchaikovsky Competition in Moscow, and the 2012 Soloist Prize of the Migros Cultural Percentage in Zurich, before being a finalist at the 2013 Clara Haskell Competition in Switzerland. His large solo and chamber music repertoire includes 500 years of music and about 30 concertos, as well as works with all works of piano by Maurice Ravel, who is his favorite composer. Besides his principal activity as a performer, he is currently the director of the International Buplanche Classique Festival in Geneva, a position he has held for the past 13 years, and has recorded 5 CDs with the Naxos, Ars Production, and Piano Classics labels. He is a laureate of the Leonards and Migros scholarships and regularly recharges himself by playing jazz and studying martial arts, which he has done for about 20 years, and we will certainly be talking about that later. Anyway, thank you. Welcome, François. Thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you. I did all those things. It's like my whole life was just winding in front of me. Thank you so much.
It's a remarkable set of accomplishments for someone so young, François. So congratulations for all that you've done. So tell me, François, I found you years ago when I was looking for I was listening to Smetana's Moldau, and I discovered you're playing a piano transcription that was absolutely breathtaking. And it's a recording I've come to many times. Initially, I was looking for music to study to, and I found this piece that was just breathtakingly beautiful. The transcription was exquisite, and your playing really was so awe-inspiring. So needless to say, I didn't get any studying done, but it was a piece that has been stuck in my mind for years. So it's really exciting to get to talk to you today. That's one of many accomplishments that you've had over your career so far. So I'm excited to talk about where you've been and where the next several years will take you. Tell me, François, how old were you when you started studying?
I started playing the piano when I was 4.5, and this was completely a coincidence. I have no musicians in my family, so there were a piano at home, and I just played on it for fun. And then my mother just brought me to a piano teacher, and it's actually the teacher who discovered that I could make progress pretty quickly, and started to be serious about my musical education. And then the music school as well, I got a lot of support from the music school, and then that's just how it went step by step. And yes, that's how it all started. It was not a big thing at first.
Sure. Do you remember your first impressions of the piano as a young kid?
Yes, I remember. I have a few images of my first lessons, and I remember that they at first tried to make me play the violin when I was 3 years
Oh,
old, and
really?
apparently it didn't match at all. I eventually played the violin again a few times in my life, seriously, for at first for 5 years, and then lately during the COVID lockdown, I took 6 months of lessons again to
Really?
practice it seriously. But when I was 3 years old, this was really not for me. And but then when I tried the piano, something was very natural for me. Maybe the position, the movements, and it was always a great pleasure to play the piano. Maybe I didn't understand much about the music, and this was not really the point, but to play the piano, this instrument, and my connection with the instrument, this was from the very beginning something special and something very agreeable, and that is still today the case. But everything else then built up on top of this connection with the instrument.
And
So
so
that's
you started studying in Geneva, is that correct?
I'm born in France, in
Oh,
Grenoble, and until I was 7, we lived there, so I started there. And my first music school was in a little city close to Grenoble, who's called Vorep. And I'm very happy now because for the last 3 years, I launched a music festival there in Vorep,
oh,
so it's
wow.
a Stravinsky festival. So it allows me to go back to the place where I'm born regularly,
Yeah.
reconnect this French roots, and yeah, that's great.
And so then after Grenoble, where did you go?
And then when I was 7, my parents moved to Geneva for work, and we are originally Swiss, so that's yeah. And then I grew up in Geneva for almost 10 years before I then moved for my studies to Germany. And I spent almost 10 years in Germany, then back to Geneva, then 1 year in New York, and 3 years in Rome.
Wow. Do you you must remember there's this really precious clip of I think you must have been 11 or something on French TV. You know which one I'm talking about?
Since I was 7, actually, it was very small. This was a extremely famous TV show in France called L'École des Fans,
Yeah.
and it was in prime time in one of the biggest national channel on Sunday afternoon. So there were in the audience maybe a few millions French people on the TV at that time. At that time, we didn't have internet, didn't have anything else than TV to just to look at something, and
Yeah.
they were everybody had maybe 5 channels on the maximum. So yeah, this was a big thing, and of course I didn't realize any of it because I was 7, but that's a very good memory to have
Yeah.
30 years later.
Was that must have been your first time? And I'll include a link to it in this video when I post it. It's really so adorable, but that must have been your first major concert.
It's not really a concert. It was more of a talk show, and then we were maybe 10 children. Every one of them had to play 3 minutes of music. This was very lovely, but that was nothing. It was not. Nowadays, we have a few prodigy shows, but this was not one of them back
I
then.
see.
This was not about child prodigies. It was just about lovely children and funny talk shows,
Yeah.
funny books, and yes, and I was not invited because I was supposed to become a great pianist or anything. It was really just because I could play a little bit, and yeah, it's very lovely, but not so. I mean, not so important for a
Sure.
career. I
Sure.
mean, maybe the real what I consider to be the start of my career is the first recital I gave when I was 11 years old. It was in the CERN amphitheater in Geneva. And then this was a real recital, but I was alone to play, and I played more than an hour of music, everything by heart, and I was the only one playing. So I could feel for the first time the importance of what it is to give a concert, the responsibility. Because if in the middle I had a, a big panic attack or something,
Yeah.
then the whole concert was ruined. And this was really my first concert experience. I don't count the conservatory auditions, because then we're always 10 or 20 children to play, and everyone plays only 5 or 10 minutes of music. But this one was a real concert where I was the only musician on stage. So this was my first real concert, yeah, a few years after this TV show.
I found this. I think I found this performance too. You played Prokofiev, Romeo and Juliet, and
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah,
I found out in the archives a little video of that, because
yeah,
I organized a concert to celebrate my 20 years career anniversary, which was day for day, 20 years after that first concert. And yeah, I used the video sample to advertise on that concert.
yeah. Do you remember what your first impression of being on stage was? Was it terrifying or thrilling, or you were only 11 or 12, I think?
Yes, I think we usually say that before 10 years old, children don't really realize and don't really get stressed. But at 11, I know I was already pretty tensed. It was not a very nice feeling. It was pretty stressful. But once I was on stage, usually after the first few minutes, when I got inside, it was really, it could become very enjoyable already.
Sure.
But what I can remember, the feeling of having no control and not understanding what is happening, and being to play and not know where I am in the score. And some pieces were so complex, I just played note for note, and I could
Yeah.
not know if I was in the middle or right before the end, or maybe the end just come and I'm
Yeah.
surprised it's already over.
Yeah.
Of course, now with the experience and skills, it's completely different. When I play a piece, I know the form of the music and everything
Sure.
is clear in my mind. But back then, for many years, it was very stressful to not have enough skills actually to understand what happens in the music, everything that happens.
Sure. So, Francois, how old were you when you and your family appreciated that this was a tremendous talent that you had and you could build a career out of this talent? How old were you?
I think it was almost from the very beginning, because
Okay.
my first music school was the music school in Vorep,
Okay.
which is Vorep is a city of 12,000 inhabitants. Maybe back then they had only 8,000, I don't know. So it was a pretty small music school. So you didn't have to be a big child prodigy to stand out. And and then yeah, for my family who had no experience in the field, it was already something very spectacular that the school director would come to them and say, this child is really very talented, you have
Yeah.
to take his musical education very seriously. So I always got the full support from my family, and it was always clear for everybody, including myself, that I would become a pianist later. And then all I have to do is keep practicing and meet the right people. And eventually I started giving concerts. As I said, when I started around 11 years old, first I gave only one concert a year, then two, then three. And 10 years later, I had a full concert agenda with 30 or 50 performances each year.
Wow.
And yes, very quickly I start to live from that too. So I was gave me the opportunity to be financially independent from my families
Sure.
once I went to Germany to study. So for me it was no, I mean, everything worked. It was not always easy, but what I got from it was always so satisfying that I never thought of doing something else. It was always clear that that's my path. I'm very lucky to have a kind of a talent, and to have the support, and to meet the people I met for a career.
Yeah. So tell me, Francois, for those of us who will never get the opportunity to be musicians, what does your training look like? When you say you go to these places to study, can you walk us through a day in the life of, yourself at the age of 15, 16, and what it took to train seriously in classical piano?
So when we study in a professional music school, we get a few classes for the theory lessons. We have, I mean, some lessons are just forever and everywhere in the world, like history of music, musical form analysis, um, solfeggio and
Mhm.
contrapoint, harmony. These are really at the core of classical music to understand. And then the most important is, of course, the weekly lessons we get with our teacher, with our instrumental teacher. And that's the most challenging as well, because a good teacher is someone who will find out how to challenge us at all time. Doesn't
Mm.
matter how hard we work. Once we arrive at the lesson, we always feel that a good teacher will make us see always everything that is still
Yeah.
uh, that has to be done still in spite of all our effort, and that can be that can be very challenging. And then this is about the studying. At the same time, studying music allows us to work as a musician as well at the same time. That it's actually a very good thing. It's not like, for example, you are a surgeon now, so you had to study first and then you
Yeah.
started. But for musicians, it doesn't work that way. For musicians, the earlier we can start working, the better it is, because we learn a lot through that, and it's completely compatible with the studies, because
Mm.
then we will use the opportunity of having weekly lessons to prepare the concerts, to prepare the competitions. And if we have big concerts and big competitions, then the lessons become even more intense, and that's perfect.
Yeah. And how many, so you have these classes in theory and composition and history of music and so on. And then you practice after class too on your own, what I imagine to
Yes,
be.
that's of course the core of music, especially for instrumental music. We have to practice our instrument, and we all have different needs. Some people need to practice a lot. Some people need to practice a little bit, but they practice extremely focused.
Mhm.
I would say an average is 4 or 5 hours a day, and
Wow.
yeah, very often, especially for very virtuosic instrument like the piano or the violin, there is always 2 or 3 years that had to be crazy with practicing like 8 hours a day, so that we really master the professional technique, and then we can go back to practice 4 hours a day. And it depends on the instrument as well, because piano is a very intellectual instrument with a lot of material to learn and an enormous repertoire. So this is probably the instrument that is the most practiced. And pianist, I mean, a concert pianist, someone who lives only while giving concerts, is probably practicing 5 hours a day on average. But a violinist, for example, would practice it a bit less, because they don't have so much repertoire they don't have to change the program every 3 days, so they
Yeah.
can practice 2 or 3 hours. And the singers, for example, wind instruments, once, because they use their body much more than other instruments, they can practice maybe 2 hours a day is maximum, or even 1 hour a day, depends of or everything. But then it has to be very regular, because to become professional musician, we really need to practice maybe 10 years in a row without big stop. And even if it's only 4 hours a day, that really needs to be done every day. It's like a sportsman, but
Sure.
it's sports only for the brain,
Sure.
and takes more time. It's less tiring, but
Yeah. So tell me, Francois, in these, let's say you're practicing piano for 5 hours every day, in your 20s, or when you're in the conservatory. What what does that look like? How do you set the things that you want to master every day, or you have sort of a weekly goal of what you are trying to accomplish? How do you decide what you practice? Maybe that seems like a strange question, but I think
it's not strange at all.
no.
It's a very interesting question. So back then, when I had a teacher who gave me weekly lessons, of course, the goal was to prepare the next lesson,
Okay.
to was to improve in the way that the teacher expected for the next lesson. So this was the most important. Of course, when I had concerts or competitions, was to prepare that, but to prepare this, having in mind all the weekly lessons I was supposed to have before the D-Day. And nowadays a little bit different because I don't have teachers anymore, so I only have the concert. So all I know is on that date I have to be ready for the rehearsal or ready for the concert. And then in my mind, I don't like to be stressed. I like to walk a lot. I like challenges, but I don't like to be 1 week before the concert and not feel ready. So I try, for example, these big concertos I have to play in the autumn. My goal is to be ready at least 1 month before the concert so that I can let it by side, let it sleep a little bit and take it again 1 or 2 weeks before the concert. And then I really feel good on stage. It's like the second, in sports, we say the second breath is better than the first one when we do some high cardio competition. And I believe the same with memory. It's not a good feeling to be on stage with something we just learned, we just mastered. It's always better to be on stage with something that we mastered in the past and we learned again for the concert. So that's how I organize myself. And then inside the day, of course, it depends what I have to do. And if I have if I'm just starting to learn a new piece, then my goal can be at the end of the day, I want to play that first movement a tempo. Or if I'm a little bit further and I'm now learning the piece by heart, my goal can be I want to have that movement at the end of the day by heart and be able to play it without the score, even if I stop a few times, but from beginning to the end. That's the goal. And I will set up goals like this for every day and 5 hours. Of course, it's very hard to practice the same piece for 5 hours.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for the brain to practice the same thing for 5 hours.
Yeah.
So it's very good. For example, in 5 hours, I have 3 pieces. One I'm learning prima vista, one I'm learning by heart, and one I'm working on the technical difficulties. So then I use 3 different areas of my brain and I don't get too tired after those 5 hours. And I stay focused for 5 hours because I do 3 different type of exercises and I have 3 different goals who requires a different technique of practicing.
That's interesting. I'm always really interested in people who have to sustain that level of focus for such a long time. And I think when you were probably younger, a lot of that discipline was, I would imagine, enforced by your teacher
not
your
really,
schooling.
to be honest, because the teacher don't have so much leeway. The teacher has only maybe 1 hour every week or 2 hours every week. It's just enough time to work on the scores. There is not enough time to do some big methodic plans, and we are all so different. That my way of practicing is extremely personal, and I know that if I talk about that with another pianist, he will tell me completely other way of practicing. So the teacher cannot really give us the keys to what really works for us. He can only give the expectation, and we have personally to develop our own methods to reach up to those expectations.
Sure.
I never had I never had a teacher who told me you have to do that and that's the way how to do it. I only got you have to do that, and I had to find by myself how to go there. And that's actually a good thing. It's not bad. It's good because it forces me to try a lot of different methods so that I eventually find out which one really suits me and which one is really efficient for me. Because without that, I cannot be a career musician.
Sure.
Yeah.
How long do you think it took you, Francois, to develop this understanding of what your own strengths and weaknesses are and how you would need to structure your own training for yourself?
It's a very long time, and then I hope I'm still discovering every year some important things about how I have to practice. And what I can say is I studied a very long time. This was a personal choice, and I took the opportunity to travel in different countries. So from beginning to the end, my professional studies lasted 15 years, and I gathered 4 master degrees or something, or the
Oh,
equivalent. And this is very this is not so exceptional for a pianist, because we have so much repertoire. If we want a big repertoire, we have to study a lot. And until I met my very last teacher, I could not imagine myself feeling complete and not having to not needing a teacher anymore. And actually, my choice was very extreme in both ways. I thought, okay, I will study a very long time, but once I'm over, I never play for a teacher again for my whole life, and I take the full responsibility of what I will bring people on stage, and it will work or not. But that, yes, that it was really black or white, my way of organizing my student life.
and so tell me a little bit more about that then. Remind me where you were in your life when you felt like you now owned your work completely. You assumed full responsibility for what you were producing.
Oh, at my last diploma in Rome. So I
Okay.
had last piano lesson who lasted 4 hours, with my teacher being extremely challenging. It was not the most enjoyable hours in my life. Then I played the concert, the final recital, and I got the best mark, and plus jury laudatio. It's called laude con laude.
Sure. Yes.
And this actually is something pretty, okay, I'm bragging now, I'm sorry. But
No,
this
you
is
should.
something pretty rare, especially in this very high level national academy. So it really gave me the green light of saying, okay, now you got a very intense last lessons. That is to show you that it's not easy to play a very nice concert. But with this return from the school, you know that you can do it, and now it's time to do it by yourself. And you got lucky enough to have 15 years plus the years before as an amateur pianist
Yeah.
of maybe, yes, you got almost 30 years of piano lessons. Now maybe
Yeah.
it's time
Yeah.
to go on your
Did you feel prepared
for this for what for
for this transition for
Yes, actually, it was a very smooth transition. It was not because my last teacher, I was already more than 30 years old. I met him only for master classes, maybe once a month, and I would play for him only the most challenging big repertoire pieces. I
sure.
would practice maybe 3 or 4 times more music because I had many concerts to give, but I would bring him only the most difficult, musically difficult pieces. And these pieces, when they were usually I would play once or twice. Exceptionally, the most difficult pieces like Gaspard de la Nuit from Ravel
Sure.
or the Corelli variations from Rachmaninoff, I would play 3 times only to him. And when I was 20 years old, the same pieces, we could work 2 months every week with
Mm,
my teacher, only on those pieces to get to the same result. So,
mm,
of course, I got a kind of an independence. It was smooth. When I was 20 years old, I could do nothing by myself. When I was 30 years old, I could do 80% of the job. But for this 20% were very important, I still needed the teacher.
mm.
So, and now I hope I can do 95% of myself, and I get the resting 5% in the
Yeah.
next years.
So Francois, looking back then at decades of piano lessons and master classes, tell me about some of the more remarkable teachers that you've had. What made them so special to you, and how did they challenge you in different ways?
I mean, the two biggest teachers I have, most important for me, were Evgeny Korolev in Hamburg and Benedetto Lupo in Rome. And I had the first one for 8 years and the second one for 3 years. And basically, they have a completely different way of teaching. There were two completely different people and pianists. I mean,
Mm,
one was from the Moscow Russian school and the classical school, and he was very mysterious
yes.
and very not very clear everything he said. We always had to make the effort to try to understand, and the other one was extremely straightforward, very Italian, extremely warm, but he could be very brutal too, but always with a big benevolence, so that we always knew it was for our own good. It was no sadism or from his part, and so they were completely different, but they challenged me the same way, because my strengths and weakness were the same, only with 10 years difference. But I needed to be challenged in the same place. So basically, it was the same. I had to do the same work. I just got a different energy, one that was really a little bit mystical, and the other one that was very straightforward and clear and manly, and that was great.
And
Great to combine those two extremes together, the Russian and the Italian school, which are, I mean, one comes from the Orthodox culture, the other one from the Catholic culture. There's two ways of saying the same. Those two religions, they say exactly the same things, but with completely different images, different culture, different decorum. And that's exactly what I could feel in the music. I could feel the same differences. And now I try to navigate between those two sources, and that's great, because it gives me an immense freedom of finding myself as a pianist. I'm not. I won't be a Russian pianist. I won't be an Italian pianist too, because I could really study both, and depending on what I play, I can rely to one or another or both.
Yeah. So tell me, Francois, on the subject of strengths and weaknesses, then, throughout your studies, what were some of the recurring themes that you struggled with, or what were your strengths and weaknesses as a young pianist in training?
I won't go too much into the details, but what I can say is that maybe because I don't come from a musician family, I had the good side of that is enormous freedom, because the parents are not, my parents were not on my back saying what I have to do, so I could really do everything like I wanted to, and this gives me a lot of strength, a lot of motivation, a lot of fun. Nothing comes to ruin my fun, actually, musically speaking. And then the bad side is that I have to become a musician on my own. So I'm not born a musician. If you have two musicians or one musician at home, you grew up in this culture, you're used to concert, you can see how your parents practice, you can see how he reacts with people, how he manages his career, and once you're 20 years old, you already naturally know everything you have to know about music, which was of course not my case, and then maybe the musical expression, how to connect emotions with music, how to express on stage, this was something I really had to learn to build for myself, because I didn't have that in my family education. And this we can say was part of my weaknesses, or let's say my challenge. And my strengths was first of all, as I said, a very natural connection to the instrument, since I'm very little, so that allows me to somehow, it just works. Think many people have to struggle to get technically, and for me, somehow I still have to practice a lot, but it's a very enjoyable kind of practice. I really like to practice the piano technique, the exercises, the scales. It's something that always was a great fun for me. And this is one strength. Another strength is, because I don't come from a musician family, I really have to understand everything on my own. And because nothing is there per se, everything had to be thought through. So everything is very clear for me, at least in my own understanding. And this brings me a big clarity of what is music, what is a career, what is practicing. and this allows me to have a very high level of mental comfort.
Yeah.
And yeah, very very often people see all the concerts I have and the music festival, everything I do, and they ask me if I'm not getting stressed from that. And actually, I'm not stressed at all. I'm a very very relaxed person, because everything is very. It took me a long time, but nowadays everything I do, it can be a lot of work. It is actually a lot of work, but it's very clear. And probably it would have not been so clear if I would have come from a musician family. And this is paradoxical a little bit, but that's how I feel that. So yeah, strengths and weaknesses, like everybody.
Yeah. And tell me, so neither of your parents are in music at all,
No,
or an artistic field? No.
no,
And no extended family
no
are musicians.
grandparents. No.
Wow.
You can dive into the genealogical tree
Yeah.
for the centuries. Don't find any.
So tell me, do they came to all of your concerts growing up, and what that must have been a lot of concerts that they attended.
Yes, of course, especially the first concert when I was a teenager, they would, my grandparents, for example, they would not hesitate to drive until Poland or Germany
Wow.
to attend to my concert. It was always a big celebration for the family. Nowadays, it's very different because they are
Yeah.
used to, and my family will come if I give concerts in Geneva, but they usually don't travel anymore to listen to me anywhere.
Yeah. And
For
they must now know so much about classical music just from the decades of your training.
Yes, a little bit, but somehow, to be honest, they didn't really took the occasion to discover that field.
Sure.
And yes, again, there are a good and bad side to that.
Yeah.
And the good side is that I at least they usually don't give me unnecessary advice. They accept that they cannot really help, and I have to do my own thing.
Yeah. So tell me, Francois, you now organize and direct a music festival and have done so for 10 years. Is that correct?
Now it's in Geneva. The Geneva Plus Classic is having its 14 seasons, so it's 14 years. Started in 2010.
And you were the founding motivation behind that, as I understand.
Yes, and I was always the executive and artistic director. And artistic direction, I always shared part of it because I'm not a specialist of all all styles of music. And since I want all styles in my festival, very often I give some kind of carte blanche to people, and they
Yeah.
bring own musicians. That's very nice. But the executive direction, I always did 100% of that, and almost the whole administration.
And when did you decide, what was your motivation for this festival? And when did you decide that you wanted to venture into directing a major musical festival?
So back then, when I was 20 years old, bachelor studies didn't look like today. So we didn't have so many classes. It was
Okay.
pretty free. And nowadays, I mean, when the students have 2 hours free to practice their instruments every day, they are very happy.
Yeah.
But that's back then where I was very free, and it was kind of a little bit boring, and I didn't like to. No, I practiced a lot, but even I had so much energy. I was
Yeah.
so young, so ambitious that even after my 5 or 6 hours of daily practice, I still had
Energy.
yeah, still wanted to do something, and there were nothing else to do. And I didn't have many concerts back then, maybe a few concerts a year, so I had a lot of free time and energy. And I thought maybe I should try to organize a concert. And I didn't have big dreams. Like I had no idea that it would become something that big that quick. And we just wanted for the first season to gather friends and play little concerts. And the first season was only 4 concerts, 4 Sundays in a row, and we were 1 to 3 people on stage, and mostly students, young students. Only 2 musicians were adults and already famous performers, piano and violin. They gave a special concert. They were like they brought seriousness to the festival. But otherwise, it was little student concerts, and we gathered an average 80 people for every concert. And this was, for us, we were so young, this was a great accomplishment. Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about the growth of the festival over the last 10 years, 13 years, 14 years, sorry.
Yes. Yes, so at the beginning it was really spectacular. I didn't expect that at all, but the budget doubled every year for like 4 years in a row. So it was
Wow.
an exponential growth. And for the 5 years, we already made an anniversary concert at the Victoria Hall. We hired
Wow.
an National Orchestra of Armenia and 4 pianos on stage. So we had double, triple, and quadruple concertos on stage, and
Wow.
we gathered more than 1,000 people, and this was really the sign of, okay, this festival is serious and it will stay forever. And since then, it's almost the same size. It continues to grow, and the budget continued to grow a little bit, but the quality continues to grow pretty exponentially. I mean, and even this year, I can see many improvements in comparison to last year. And the smell of freshness is always there at every season. This
Sure.
magic. And somehow, yes, I don't know, this festival was the best compliment I heard about this festival in Puplin is that it does have a soul. And sometimes I can really feel that because things are going on their own and I have to push a little bit, but then the nicest things are things who comes from outside that were not asked and just come like a gift from heaven. And
Yeah.
for example, we had a concert one week ago, last Saturday. This was a historical concert of Geneva, most famous and best quartet, maybe the Aviv Quartet. And this was
Wow.
a last concert with the first violin who played in this quartet for 27 years. And they choose to do it in my festival. And I didn't
Wow.
ask them for that. I didn't expected anything of
Yeah.
that. I just invited them to play a concert. And then they told me, okay, this will be our last concert with it. So it was a magical historical concert. There were 250 people in the room, standing ovation at the end. The concert lasted 3.5 hours. So
Wow.
this kind of thing happened without even asking for it. And it keeps on happening every year. And this makes this festival really magical.
And so what is the vision behind each festival? Do you start out with a broad idea of what you would like the festival to look like, or explain
Yes,
how you realize this?
I start the artistic direction with an architecture. Well, I know I want this festival to have that many concerts with orchestra, that many concerts chamber music. I want 1 or 2 piano recitals, and then I think of the people I know and all the proposals I got throughout the year to fill up every concert with the best musicians I can find. And yes, that's how it works. And this architecture is always improving year after year. For example, this year we always had 1 or 2 jazz concerts, but this year I decided to give much more weight for that. And 1/3 of the events are jazz oriented, for
Oh,
example.
interesting.
That's new for our festival to have so many jazz events.
Now you have an interest in jazz music,
Yes,
obviously.
big interest, and that's probably that's probably my next step as a musician is to become a professional jazz pianist.
Oh,
And
wow.
I really feel that this will allows me to improve a lot for the classical music. And my big goal for the maybe next 5 years is to be able to play classical music like a jazz musician.
Oh,
Not
wow.
in not in the I don't mean about the style or the music itself. I mean about the feeling
Sure.
and the energy that.
Sure. So, forgive me, I'm not a musician. I've never studied piano, and I don't know much about jazz. But describe the differences between classical piano and jazz piano, and how one sort of enriches your understanding of the other.
Yeah, I believe that for many, because I start to know many jazz musicians,
Yeah.
especially with this festival that hires a lot of
Yeah.
them. I believe that many jazz musicians have the ideal of playing jazz like they were classical musicians, which means the precision, the quality of sound, the form of the complexity and simplicity at the same time of the musical form, and the inspiration and the richness and the profound, the deepness of the thoughts of the and to gather the whole human experience inside one style of music that is possible with classical music. That's the point of classical music. I believe that jazz musicians, probably many of them, are in search of this classical ideal, and the opposite is can be true as well. And I would now be in the opposite case, which is I am a professional classical musician, and my ideal is to be able to find this feeling of freedom on stage, this extreme spontaneous and intense energy that one can actually only have when they are completely improvising. It's very hard to be spontaneous when you know exactly what you have to do. But yes, and this connection with the instrument that is completely natural, in the sense of jazz musicians do practice, but they don't practice what they are going to play. They practice how they're going to improvise. So once they show up on stage, they don't know what they will play. And the fact that they invent every note at the present moment allows them to have a connection with the instrument and with the music that is different than for classical musicians. But the ideal would be for classical musicians to be in the same kind of present moment with the same quality of consciousness, because jazz musicians, when they listen to each other, they have to listen which notes they're playing. When we play chamber music, we don't have to listen which note we're playing, because we know which note comes. It's already in the score and we already rehearsed before. What we listen to is the sound and the breath, the timing. And that will be different for every performance. We listen to the acoustic because we try to find the best sound for the acoustic, the best balance. When I play piano with a violinist, I try not to play too loud or play loud enough. But I don't really listen to his notes because I know exactly what he's going to play. But a jazz musician don't care so much about acoustics because it's not that precise. But he cares about which note he's going to play, and then he has to listen so that he plays the right kind of notes too, so that it matches the note that the other one already played. And this is called the interplay, and that's how jazz musicians listen to each other. But if a classical musician is able to listen like a classical musician, and on top of that, to have this way of listening to the others like a jazz musician, then it will be something so complete and so fresh. That's really something extremely exciting to think about. And I can already feel, because now I'm starting to practice a lot more of jazz music. I'm starting to improvise at the jam sessions. So I'm getting a little feeling of what is jazz professionalism, starting to get that. And this already gives me a completely another feeling on stage when I'm playing classical music, and that's very, very enjoyable.
It seems like it requires incredible intelligence, François. I mean, what you're describing is the improvisation, I think, is I mean, how do you
requires a lot of
practice?
practice, but intelligence is not indispensable for music.
I guess how do you practice to prepare to improvise? What I don't really understand what that means.
So when you play jazz, you have when you play a jazz standard, in the score there is only the melody and the chords.
Okay.
These chords allow you 1, 2, or 3 different scales that feel good when you play. You use those notes to make lines on that chord. So, and the chord itself, you have an infinite, not infinite, but maybe you have let's say 10 different combinations of notes that will play the same chord.
Okay.
And then those combination, you can choose to play in any register and any orders of the notes, which gives you maybe 100 combinations. So you have to prepare your ears and your hand to be able to play enough of these chords so that you don't repeat them. Otherwise, it becomes. And then that's for the left hand. It's very basic, of course. It's endless complexity on top of that. But the basis is that. And then on with the right hand, you're supposed to play a melody, to improvise a melody. It can be lines, or it can be more melodic, or it can be another chord as well. It can be very rhythmical, or it can be very vocal. You can choose, but you have to choose your notes inside the scales that matches to the chord. And some chords allows 4 or 5 different scales. Some other allows only 1 or 2. And then I would just you have to practice so that you get used for both hands to do the notes that matches the score and matches each other hand. And once once you're comfortable with that, you know which note you're allowed to play. Then it's about to let go and try to, with a few basic rules, not to make something boring. And just trying to make nice improvisation, nice chords and nice chords and nice lines, nice melodies. And that's how we practice the improvisation. And then we have to get used to the standard, which is I don't know in English or we say the chord progression.
Sure.
It has to become we have to learn it by heart, get a feeling of the form so that we don't get lost in the form, because the form repeats itself. But sometimes many standards has a form in it's A A B A. So which means once I play the B, I have 3 times A. And I have to have the right feelings that I play only 2 times and I miss 1, or I play 4 times, and while the others are already playing the B part. So I need this, and this is something that we don't need at all when we play classical music. So when we start to get comfortable with that, it's an enormous part of music in general that we get to understand, because we don't need to understand that in classical music. In classical music, we need to know all details by heart. And classical music is a masterwork of classical music. I don't know, Chopin concerto or Beethoven sonata is a mountain of details. And we never know enough of them. And with jazz music is the score is extremely simple. It's the equivalent of 2 bars of Beethoven late sonata. But from that, then we have to invent everything, and everything is possible in all styles. We can change, we can reharmonize even if we, and this is at the same time enormous freedom and a big challenge, because we have to do something interesting, and we don't have. When we play the big classical composers, if we don't feel very creative, and if we only play what is written with all details with a very strong emotional intention, that's enough to make a great concert. But in jazz music, it's we need to be creative, otherwise it's boring.
Interesting.
It's a different way of being an artist. It's interesting, and both of them, I believe, when we put them together, we reach in different way the most complex form of musical style in history of mankind. And if someone can master both of them, there won't be one style of music that could be more challenging than that. And in the world of music, the highest level of instrumental technique is required for classical musician. The highest level of improvisational complexity is required for jazz musicians. So if you master both of them, that's you are
a consummate musician.
Actually, you are the ultimate performer. But in my wildest dreams, I mean, to be the ultimate musician would require you to master the art of conducting as well, because conducting would then allow you to understand how to work with other musicians as well in the most complex way, how to gather all this information and try to make people play together. Someone is able to conduct, and there were very, very few musicians in the world who could do that. I can think of André Prévin, for example, or who could do the three of them, master three of them, or maybe Friedrich Gulda. They were really, or Leonard Bernstein. There were people who really could play all styles. Maybe they mastered one of them more than the others, but still they knew enough of all these three careers so that they could have probably the best and more accurate understanding of music in general in the whole history.
Now, is that something you want to do, François, after you work more on your jazz piano?
I don't know, I don't think once I I always loved this sentence. It was a chess master, a big world champion. I don't remember the name, but some journalist asked a question that I used to ask to chess master, and I probably get bored from that. And he asked him how many moves do you
Yeah.
think in advance? And he said, I think one move in advance. That was the best answer possible. And actually, it doesn't help in life. I think we can have a little idea of what to do in the next 20 years, but if we have I think I need to know exactly what I want to do in the next 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
Next 5 years, have kind of an idea, and in the next 20 years, that would be
Who
so
knows?
sad, boring if I already knew
Yeah.
what I want to achieve. And
Yeah. So are you self-taught in jazz, François? How did you?
I had many teachers.
Okay.
I just got my last jazz lesson yesterday. It lasted 2 hours.
Oh,
It was the
wow.
last of the year, so we spoke about next year challenges, next
Yeah.
goals. Now for the last 6 months, it was very exciting because we had a very very clear goal. The goal was that I become able to play at the jam sessions of my own festival this summer.
Oh,
And I had
wow.
4 or 6 months to prepare that, and I did achieve that. So now I feel very I am very proud and very comfortable to play the jam sessions. The next one is the day before tomorrow, and that was the goal. And for next year, then we need to find new goals.
So tell me, what are these jam sessions? It's you at the piano and who else?
A jam session is a jazz concert where the musicians, anybody can show up on stage, ask the other musicians to play one standard. Usually they play one of the most famous standards, around 100 of them.
Okay.
And they just play together without practicing, without rehearsing. That's the jam session. Usually you invite a group. In my festival, we always have a trio. I'm not part of the trio. We let the trio play maybe 30 minutes by themselves, and then the trio will say, now the jam is open, and the first musician will show up on stage, and we don't know who they are. For example,
Okay.
the last jam session, some guy showed up with a marimba. He brought his marimba. He showed
Oh,
up with
wow.
that. That was really cool. And
Yeah.
he went on stage and asked the musician, "Hey, can we play that? Can we play that?" And that's the meaning of jam session. It's a completely spontaneous concert where everyone is allowed to play. Of course, you have to be skilled enough not to ruin the fun.
Yeah.
But usually people know about this, and even if you don't know, it becomes really scary if you if you don't have the level, you would probably be too scared to show up on
Sure.
stage. So
Sure.
yeah, that's the jam sessions.
So what makes it great when you think about some of the jam sessions that have gone really well and maybe some of the ones that have gone maybe not so well, however you would define that, what makes a really good jam session? What makes a great collaboration in your mind?
It's a spontaneous musical collaboration. So usually, I mean, everybody listens to each other, and it's a great result. If you have very skilled musician, you will have very complex improvisation performance. If you have lower skilled musicians, it will sound nice but not be very complex. But that's fine because the jam session allows that. People know that it's spontaneous. People don't
Yeah.
expect very complex jazz concert. There's the difference between a jam and a concert. Concert is supposed to be rehearsed with people
Okay.
who know each other, who rehearse each other, who prepare. And concert is supposed to have many more exclusive compositions. So if a jazz musician play a concert, he can either play only his own compositions or make a mix of his own compositions and standards. But the jazz session will have only standards. Or exceptionally, you can show up with the scores of your composition, but it better have to be a very good composition, otherwise it will not be as good as the traditional standards. And I never saw by myself, okay, I saw a little bit something that what can happen is when one musician want to show himself too much. That's usually what can happen bad in a jam session, when someone is there to show himself and not to collaborate. So maybe the solo is too long, or he just show up he wants to show up his technique, and this is not really the point of jazz. It makes point in a classical concert. There is always like the cadenzas, for example.
Sure.
They're meant to show the skills, technical skills of the performer. But in jazz, usually you can do that a little bit, but when you use your whole solo, and when you do that in a jam session, that's usually not the point of it. The point of it is really to have a shared fun. And if someone is there to show himself, it's actually not the real place for that. And maybe not the best style of music.
So tell me, Francois, how do you find your voice as a jazz musician? And how do you find your voice as a classical pianist? And how are those different?
They are completely opposite, especially in the hierarchy of values, but they are completely complementary as well, because they are opposite. Let's say classical music, in the world of music, classical music is exceptional in the way that the melody runs everything. It's the most important. Most important is when you think of your favorite classical pieces, you don't think of the rhythm.
No.
You think of the melody.
Yeah.
You don't think of the chords, because the chords are decided by the melody. In every other style of music that I know, it's always the opposite. If you go to some, I don't know, African tribal music, it's always first they start to play the rhythm. Then maybe if they have instruments for that, they start to play ostinato that implies chords.
Okay.
And then they start to sing it.
Okay.
Or improvise it with instruments. It's the same with jazz. We say the most important musician in a jazz group is the drummer.
Okay.
From the drummer, after it could be actually a complete. If it was a complete improvised piece without any scores and without any decided material, the drummer would begin alone, and then the bass and the chord instrument like piano and bass will start to make a chord progression, and then the soloist instruments or the voice will go on top of that to start to improvise. And that's usually what happens when we play jazz. The melody has to adapt to the chords, who has to adapt to the rhythm.
Okay.
In classical music, it's the complete opposite. If you hear an opera, for example, you have one singer and you have 100 musicians in the orchestra. The 100 musicians are supposed to follow the singer. It's not the opposite.
Not the other way. Okay.
In the practical, so very often it's the opposite. When I play as a soloist with the orchestra, I don't expect them to follow me. Yeah. But in the theory, the music is thought in a way that I'm supposed to get followed by it. And a very, very good orchestra will follow me. That's actually different in a very high-level professional orchestra or amateur orchestra. The very high-level orchestra is capable of following a soloist if the soloist decides to take completely another tempo at the concert, for example. But this is exceptional. Of course, classical musicians usually don't know that, because they grew up inside the classical music their whole life. So they didn't have jazz music, or just to compare and to realize that classical music is so exceptional in that way. And very often that's something that can happen in jam sessions, when classical musicians are not skilled enough in jazz and they come out on stage. They still have this classical hierarchy of value, and they still expect everyone to follow their melodies, and then it doesn't match. because no one is prepared to follow someone's melody.
Yeah.
The drummer is just supposed to have the strongest rhythm and will never breathe, so that he plays with the melody. And very often we can experience that. Always kind of funny. So that's the main difference I see. And as like everything in life, it's always good to be able to go on both ways, in one way and the other opposite ways. The best way to master something is to see it from two opposite point of views. And to play classical music and jazz would probably allow a musician to have this opportunity.
Yeah, I think it must be very difficult to relinquish that structure and sort of rigidity that you were probably so accustomed to in your classical training. I think that's something you and I probably have in common. In medical training is also very structured, very hierarchical, very piecemeal. You learn, you watch and you close skin for years before you really do anything else. So it must have been hard for you to sort of break free from that mold.
Absolutely, and that's why the first jazz performance experiences for classical musician are extremely stressful.
Yeah.
I was not stressed that much for 10 years maybe. The
Yeah.
first time I played with a rhythm and section. And actually, I mean, the challenge, nothing was supposed to be hard, especially for a skilled classical musician. Nothing
Yeah.
was supposed to be dangerous.
Yeah.
But just the fact that everything was reversed, everything was this was so stressful. And
Yeah.
remember the 30 minutes I had to spend before showing up on stage at the jazz audition in my little jazz school. This was so stressful, and I was probably much more stressed than the other amateur musicians who didn't have at all the same skills, but they learned only that. So for them, it was completely natural to practice one chord progression and go improvise with the rhythm and section. But for me, it was but when, especially when it goes well, you need maybe one or two experiences, and then the stress is forever gone. And now I know I can show up at the jam sessions. I will be a little bit excited. I will be excited, but it is not. I cannot say I'm stressed anymore. And I really needed a few experience for that, because it's completely new for the brain, but at the same, it's completely natural too. And it's actually much more natural than play classical music. So once you experience it once or twice, then it's just a second nature.
So tell me, Francois,
Just
who have some of your favorite classical pianists been, and then who have some of your favorite jazz pianists been, and what do they have in common, or what do you admire about both of them?
It's very hard to say, because all of the great musicians, they have their own universe, their
Yeah.
own style, and they do something extraordinary that the others don't do. So there is not one thing that I'm looking for when I listen to musician. That would be sad and cheap. So every musician can show something really interesting and personal, is great. Of course, I know for when I look for classical interpretations, for example, of the pieces I'm currently practicing, I know that some of them are specialized in this style.
Sure.
And I know which one does this in a traditional way, which is a secured inspiration, or which one is very personal in this repertoire, which can be very interesting, but I should not try to imitate, because otherwise that would be an imitation of some eccentricity, and that would not. It works well if he or she does that, because that's something personal. But if I do that, it's an imitation, so it doesn't work. And some very traditional playing allows me to understand the pieces better. So yeah, it depends which kind of music. Of course, I have some pianists who make a deep imprint, but every great pianist is just amazing, and it depends which piece, which repertoire, which composer.
Yeah.
And for the jazz pianist, it's exactly the same. It's even more different from one jazz pianist to another because they don't play the same notes at all.
Mm.
At least between two classical pianists, they play the same score. So only the interpretation is different. But between two jazz musicians, everything is different. The style
Sure.
is different. So yeah,
Yeah.
very hard to choose. And
Yeah.
I have my periods. I mean periods. my different
Yeah.
moments, where like this style or another style. So yeah, it depends on my mood, of course. If I
Yeah.
need some background music, I really like very modern jazz, more kind of hip hop chords and repetitive, minimalistic, atmospheric jazz. If I like something exciting, maybe I look for, I don't know, virtuosic jazz from the 60s. And with classical music, classical, what touches me the most are the composers from beginning of the 20th century, especially French and Russian. That they
Sure.
are really the one I enjoy the most when I listen to concerts. And otherwise, when it's the end of the day and I need something more spiritual, I like Baroque, Renaissance music,
Yeah.
or minimalistic music from American composers of the late 20th century. Yeah.
Yeah. So you love Ravel, is that right? I
Yes, sure. It's basically my favorite composer. And now my big project for these 2 or 3 years is the recording of the whole work with piano, which includes the two concertos, the solo music, and the chamber music as well. And that will be in total a CD box of 6 CDs. And we
Wow.
already recorded 3 of them. They are already mastered. And record the next 3 in the next spring, and everything will be released, physically released in autumn 2024. And but until then, we'll have a lot of digital releases, because what is already prepared is actually the most challenging pieces, which are the two concertos and the solo pieces. And there are 3 CDs already that are ready with the music.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So that I guess that's a good way of asking, bringing us to today. How are you spending your time these days? You direct a very a music festival that has really uh, gotten tremendously popular over the last 10 years. And tell us a little bit more about how you spend your time.
Actually, I consider myself a pretty rigorous person,
Yeah.
completely free schedules, which means I never know at what time I will wake up the next day.
Yeah.
But I always have my to-do list for every day, and I can organize myself completely spontaneously, which is actually something I'm extremely thankful.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, many things has to be done. And now I know, for example, I have to master that second Rachmaninoff concerto in the next few days so that I can start practicing the third Rachmaninoff concerto, with the goal of having the third Rachmaninoff concerto ready
Yeah.
1 month before the concert. So I know pretty much intuitively how much I have to improve that concerto today.
Yeah.
And I will practice a few hours in that direction. At the same time, I have many other concerts, so I have to prepare the other programs as well. I always have a main program that is very challenging, that usually the solo recitals
Mhm.
or the concertos, especially if I play the pieces for the first time. So I'm learning them. That's the most important practice. And then every pieces that are in my repertoire, or the pieces who are much more easy. For example, some chamber music concerts, the repertoire is sometimes much more easy, and I know I can learn it pretty quickly, and most of the work will be done at the rehearsals.
Mm.
And so yeah, for me, a perfect working day would be, let's say, 4 or 5 hours of piano practice, 2 or 3 hours on the computer for administration, to run my 2 festivals and my performing career as well. And on top of that, I'm always very happy if I can manage to do an average 1 hour of exercising every day, and something like 1 hour of foreign languages, which are my big passion as well.
Wow.
And yeah, and now I'm always learning different languages, but they are always the same. I mean, I always try to keep improving. Even French, sometimes I learn new words in French, and I really practice them
Yeah.
to uh, and currently I'm learning Chinese, because I'm
Wow.
practicing Chinese because I will go there in a few months. And when I was studying in Italy, I would practice 1 or 2 hours of Italian every day, obviously. And
Yeah.
it's something I try to keep doing. I think it's the best training for the brain. Make
Yeah.
everything else easier once it's like a sport for the body. It makes the whole physical life better if we exercise every day. And I'm
Yeah.
sure it makes the whole mental life gets more comfortable if we exercise foreign languages every day.
Yeah.
So that would be my perfect working day. So that's many hours, I suppose. And maybe I cannot do that every day, but that's mostly the goal. And I'm happy if I do 80%.
Did you grow up speaking you grew up speaking French, François?
Yes, that's my mother tongue.
It's your mother tongue.
And then I had, of course, in the Swiss school, we had German and English, because German is our
Yeah.
most important national language in Switzerland. Then I went to study in Germany, and then I can say German was the first language that I really mastered. Then English when I was in New York, and now I'm trying to get fluently in Chinese. Unfortunately, I never lived long enough in China to get really fluent, and I never integrated myself to the Chinese society as well, which make a big difference, because
Yeah.
going as a tourist or living in the country, working in the country, that's in my opinion, is something that is really required to master a language forever, and which I could do in Italian,
Yeah.
German. But so now I found a great Chinese teacher, and she prepares me for my next tour in China.
Wow. And when is that? When do you go? So your mom is from China.
Yes, my mom is Chinese. She taught
From
me a little bit when I was a little child, but we didn't. We always talk French because she had to learn French at the same time, and that's
oh.
yeah.
And
a
is she
li-
from Shanghai?
No, she's from the Guangzhou province,
Okay.
from the south, and
Will you go to where she's from when you go to China in your upcoming tour?
not so often actually, because I mostly go to places where I know the concert organizers,
Okay.
and they're more in the Shanghai region. So I don't visit my Chinese family so often, but maybe
Yeah,
every 2 years. And
sure. I'm imagining that you approach the study of languages very similar to the study of classical piano. I'm imagining that you have the same sense of structure and rigor and discipline when you decide to learn a foreign language than when you try and learn Rachmaninoff's concerto.
yeah, something that classical music really taught me is that the memory works best with the rigor of details.
Yeah.
The more we are rigorous about doing things right, even the smallest details, the more it stays in the long-term memory.
Mm.
That's something I learned. I can use in every areas of life, and then of course the constants. And I know it's better to practice 20 minutes every day for a whole year long, one foreign language, than to practice 3 hours a day on vacation for a week and then forget everything the next few months.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. What is it about languages that are so thrilling to you? Why do you think you enjoy them so much?
I enjoy them because I really believe that um, the complexity of one's thinking comes a big part of it comes from the richness of the vocabulary.
Mm.
So the vocabulary of one's own languages,
Yeah.
mother tongue at first, but then I truly believe that except the everyday objects and activities. Like a bread is always a bread in every languages.
Yeah.
It's bread as something different. Otherwise, it's another world. The
Yeah.
ravioli is a ravioli. It's not a bread anymore.
Yeah.
But everything that is conceptual, it's never 100% translatable.
Sure.
So it always have a nuance, and this nuance brings the complexity of thinking. For example, a few examples that I really like, two of them, for example, is the word leadership. Leadership in French is pouvoir. Pouvoir comes from the verb pouvoir. It's not power. Pouvoir means the capability to do something. I'm capable of doing. Je peux dormir means I'm allowed to sleep.
Okay.
Or je peux jouer du piano means I am skilled enough to play piano. So it comes from the potentiality of doing something, or to have the allowance of doing something. That's a very bad translation of the word leadership. In German, leadership is die Macht. It comes from doing, from the verb machen, which is to do, to make. So it means for a German guy, the leadership is connected with the action. If you don't do anything, you have no leadership. Whereas for the French guy, is the potentiality of action, which means you don't really necessarily have to do something to prove your leadership, but you have to make people know that you could do that if you wanted to. And leadership in the English way is because pouvoir is very strong. Your pouvoir is for bad things as well. If you have the pouvoir of putting someone in a jail, even if he's innocent, that's a very bad leadership. You cannot say it's leadership. You can say it's I don't know the right word in English for that.
Sure.
But leadership is always good, which means it's always for the common good, and it's more in the sense of influence. Someone who has a great leadership is someone who's supposed to be charismatic. We're supposed to motivate people to do something great and to work together. This is the sense of leadership. These three different cultures use three different words who are very bad translation of each other. They don't have 100% translation of the same word, and that tells a lot about their culture and their way of thinking about things. Another example that I love is the word education. Because education in France is only for children. When we say cet enfant manque d'éducation, this children miss education, means he's not well behaved. And this we will never think of educate an adult. Otherwise, it's really very patronizing.
Interesting.
But if I decide now to go on a master degree, I cannot say it's part of my education because I'm not a child anymore. I say it's part of my studies.
Oh, okay.
American person, studies are part of education.
Yes.
So I can say in my age, I like to further my education. Nobody finds that funny. If you say that in French, that's a joke. It means I'm still a child. So, and this brings the idea that I really could see from my own eyes that, for example, American people have no shame and get a lot of support when they're 50 years old, already have an amazing career, and decide to stop everything to further 2 years in MBA.
Yeah.
This is something I find amazing, and I learned for myself when I was in New York, and I think the same way now because I think it's very positive. And I know that in Europe, when you do that, some people will find it weird, and it can be even interpreted as I want to change my life because I'm not happy with my current situation. So I will educate myself again, and it's a sign of weakness, and it's culturally not so accepted and not so supported. And people think that, come on, you're so old now, you're just taking advantage of the free studies.
Yeah.
Instead of letting young people do that. And that's very sad because it puts people inside
a box.
Inside boxes instead of giving everybody the complete choice of his own destiny and the possibility to further education at any age.
Yeah. So tell me, François, how do you study your languages these days? You have formal lessons, formal instruction, or is it self-taught mostly at this point?
It depends on the language. Of course, for a French guy to study Italian is very easy and natural, enjoyable because 90% of the words have the same roots.
Yeah.
To study Chinese, that requires a lot of dedication, and it's a long time. Most of the time we're just learning the words and the characters, and we have to learn them. We have to learn because most words have 1 to 4 characters.
Yeah.
Most of them have 2, let's say, and we have to repeat them writing because to learn Chinese, it's officially the scientifically the only language in the world that use the 2 parts of the brain, because you need the imagery memory as well to recognize the character, and it's the only language that use signs. Because all other science languages like Japanese or Korean, they're not signs, they're actually alphabets. And sometimes, for example, traditional Korean use Chinese signs, and Japanese use the Chinese signs as well. So in regards to the origins of signs, Chinese is the only sign language in the world, written sign language. And we have to memorize the signs. And the fluency, the literacy is officially reached above 2,000 signs. And with those 2,000 signs, you can do 20,000 words already. So you need maybe 3,000 of them to reach the fluency, like in every languages. So it's a lot of repetition. And once the repetition is done, which you don't need to do with other languages, of course, then it's the practice. And the practice is to use the words you just learned. And I believe that that's very personal. I believe the best way to improve in the language is to do written essays. It doesn't matter how complex, or you can even say very silly things, but the fact that to bring everything together, because to write is like to playing music slowly. It allows you to have enough time to think of everything at first, until it becomes natural and you can play at the right tempo. And to write foreign language is exactly the same, because now I'm talking English. I don't have the time to think of the English syntax. I will do lots of mistakes that I won't do if I'm writing to you now. And when I'm writing, I can see the mistakes I still do, and I can correct them and see what I didn't master behind those mistakes, which are the grammatic themes that I need to practice, so that I won't do those mistakes anymore. Whereas if I'm only talking, I do the mistakes. Nobody cares about the mistakes because I'm talking good enough, and I will never improve my English. The writing redactional tasks, these are the most efficient, I think, in every language. And then I heard one very intelligent French guy, very famous guy who's supposed to have 3 theses. He said something very interesting. Education is synonymous to correction, which means the real way you can educate yourself on any skills is to produce something and get corrected by a teacher. That's the only way to really improve. Self-teaching is very limited. I don't really believe in that. But either doesn't matter if I'm playing a classical or a jazz music piece or writing an essay in a foreign language. I'm really learning something when I show it to someone who knows, who can teach me, who can tell me what I did wrong, who can support me in everything I did great, and then together we can see how to improve the. So that's the way of learning anything. I think it's very general.
It requires a lot of humility too.
Yes, of course, but with the right people, humility is for me, it's synonymous to happiness. So and the process of learning is always a swing between comfort and a kind of discomfort. If it's done with the right people, it's a very little discomfort and a lot of humility, lots of fun and happiness. And once we master something new, then we have a moment of comfort and complete fun. But it doesn't last too long. It gets boring very quickly. So we need to find another area where we're not skilled enough, so that we find this discomfort again, get
Sure.
corrected by the teacher and improve. And this is the real swing between and the energetically, this is the same swing between discipline and pleasure.
Mm.
We're only in the pleasure, we start losing the pleasure after a while.
Yeah.
And without the discipline, we just give up.
Yeah.
And if we're only in the discipline, we will give up too at one point, because maybe we last longer, but we will still give up. So we need to swing between pleasure and discipline so that we can keep it forever.
Yeah.
It's the same between comfort and discomfort, and both bring the improvement and the drive, the endless drive.
Yeah. You said something interesting about how language constrains our ability to communicate with each other and be very exact in our thinking too. What do you think constrains most musicians then? Is it technique or artistry, or what parallel would you draw there? Maybe that's a tough question.
Yes. Can you ask the question?
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking, you made a really interesting point about how
that implies that musicians are constrained.
Yes, and maybe that's not a correct assumption.
That's very personal. So some are probably very constrained and some are not constrained at all. Maybe some musicians are too free and they need to be more constrained for their improvement. So it can be so general.
Sure. So you're leaving for China soon, is that right? In the next couple months?
Yes, in end of October.
And we've talked a little bit about classical music in Asia before we started here. Tell me a little bit. It seems like I'm excited to see how popular it has become throughout Southeast Asia and East Asia. Tell me a little bit about the culture there in classical music and how that compares to maybe Western Europe, where you're more familiar.
Actually, I don't expect so many differences, because the classical music is maybe to go back to the last topic, is a very constrained music. And we're supposed to play only and exactly what is in the scores. So my performance will be exactly the same, whether it is in United States or in Switzerland or in China. We play exactly the same. The audience will be a little bit different, but since it's the same music, they will react the same way, which means the classical music is a listening music. It's not the music to dance to. It's not the music, not the background music that allows people to eat or talk with each other at the same time. So people basically have the same attitude towards classical music everywhere in the world, though they're supposed to not make any noise and be very quiet during the concert, applause at the end, and if they like it, they applaud a lot. They don't. They applause politely. So I don't see many difference. Of course, in the demographics, there are big difference. And
tell us about that.
Yes, in Asia you see a lot of young people. In Eastern Europe, I'm used to see a good mix between all generations. In Western Europe, an all very prosperous country, it's a much more conservative audience with older people, and then there are a few cultural differences. For example, the United States, a good concert usually gets a standing ovation. So I'm bragging again, but I never gave a concert without getting my standing ovation in the United States. It happens in my festival in Switzerland like once a year.
Really?
20 performances. So when it does happen, it really means that was a historical concert. That was an extraordinary concert. And it never happens in Asia, because people are so publicly not so expressive, but they can clap so loud that you understand, and it feels even better than a standing ovation. So there are just some slight cultural differences. But I'm used to say, because sometimes I get the question, is the audience nice? Is it? And I always answer, if you play very well, every audience is great in the world. There is no bad audience in the world.
Yeah.
Of course, some audience, like the Chinese audience, we have to get used to the noises because then they're not they are just a very noisy people on the streets. They talk loud. When we don't understand Chinese, we always have the feeling that they are fighting each other when they talk normally.
Yeah.
Especially French people who have the softest and most monotonous
Yes.
language in the world. Every language feels like people are fighting each other. If you're French.
Yeah.
So we have to get used to that. It's always shocking for the first performances in China because we have to start usually we enter the stage and
Uh-huh.
then the audience noise will have a very quick decrescendo, and
Uh-huh.
once it's quiet enough we usually start to play. But when we're in China, we enter and the noise doesn't get down. I mean, the noise is always stays the same. So at a
Yeah.
certain point, we have to start playing. We cannot wait that it's quiet enough because we will never get that level of quietness that we get in Europe. But
Yeah.
that's okay because I know that, and it's very surprising because when we talk to the audience after the concert, they give the same quality of feedback
Mm.
that we would get in Europe, which means they were exactly as attentive
Sure.
as to the concert as European people. They were just not as quiet, but
Yeah.
they're still as focused. So yes, we just have to accept that the noise doesn't mean that people don't care. It's just a cultural difference,
Yeah.
and get used to that, play, and
Yeah. I think it's so amazing that I think one of the things I would be most jealous of you is having now traveled all around the world and shared, your art with so many
I'm
different
talking.
cultures, and
Yeah, I
that's a
talked
huge
about
gift.
China, which is the opposite of South Korea or Japan, where people
Yeah.
are extremely quiet at the
Yeah.
audience, which
Yeah.
is actually intimidating for me because then I can feel like the slightest wrong notes will be a scandal. Uh, they're even more quiet than or European or American audiences.
Really.
Yeah, so inside the continent, there are
Yeah.
complete cultures who can be at the opposite of each other. So
Yeah.
big.
So tell me, Francois, on the subject of going back to achieving balance between discipline and pleasure, I understand you also study martial arts.
Yes, I practice it. I'm not. I did tiny bits of competition, but I'm not a professional, not even semi-professional. It's just yeah, physical practice is a great way of keeping in shape, great way of keeping young and physically and have the maximum potential of physical power and energy at all time throughout life before great age. So that's something that really helps me for my career because I always feel like I'm even, I mean, today I'm much more fit than when I was 20 years old. And when you are amateur, a kickboxer, for example, you can
Yeah.
keep with such a complete sport, you can keep improving until you are 50 years old, probably
Mm.
your physical fitness and your energy. So that's a great thing to do. And I know especially when we have a daily practice of something that is physical but not sport, like playing an instrument,
Yeah.
either you are very fit and you don't get any problems, or you are surrounded by issues always, and
Yeah.
musicians and career performers who don't practice regularly a challenging sports, they usually get many problems at all times
Interesting.
to visit physiotherapists every 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's not something I wanted for myself. So
No. What kind
yeah,
of martial arts, Francois?
I started with judo. I did 6 years of it until the brown belt, and then for the last 15 years I'm practicing Thai boxing.
Oh, interesting. Is that very popular in Switzerland?
Yes, in Europe, Thai boxing became very popular in the last 10 years. I think only in Geneva is only 500,000 inhabitants, and we have maybe 15 clubs, Thai boxing clubs.
Wow.
It's really very popular. All the kickboxing arts and the Thai boxing art is supposed to be the most elaborate, efficient, and focused. So So many people do that. Yeah, it's very common. It's nothing extraordinary. When I was a child, to practice boxing or Thai boxing was pretty exceptional. It was considered very brutal and only for people who are not sophisticated enough to
Yeah.
practice judo or karate, so the
Yeah.
Japanese martial arts. Because actually, what I do are more combat sports than martial arts.
Okay.
Martial arts have this a lot of philosophy, spirituality around. They have a lot of tradition and psychology. Maybe this is very interesting. But what I wanted to do were real combat sports, which means something that is physically challenging
Uh-huh.
with full contact sparring, so that I can really deal with the daily stress and performance stress,
Yeah.
getting used to experience the most primitive stress form of all time, which is the physical combat.
Physical strength. Yeah.
So judo and Thai boxing are really very focused combat sports, which who has very efficient techniques and requires a very high level of physical fitness. When you train Aikido, for example, you don't need to run 2 hours a day to get the cardio.
Uh-huh.
To get your black belt of Aikido is just a succession of movements who are maybe not as efficient in a real combat situation, which is not what I'm looking for. Hopefully, I don't get attacked on the street. That helps. But to experience that in a secured way, it's very interesting for me, and I can only get that in different kind of combat sports. Yeah.
Sure. I'm noticing, Francois, a theme in your life really are these activities that require sort of intense, dedicated focus and real investment over time. Whether it's language learning or
That's
classical music,
something.
jazz, piano. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm born with that or if it just came throughout my life, but everything that I do on a daily basis, now that I'm not very young anymore, it's always things that I started for the piano. It was almost 30 years ago. The combat sports was almost 20 years ago. The
Yeah.
festival almost 15 years ago. It's always something that I started a long time ago
Yeah.
and that I kept doing for a very long time. Of course, on a completely different level of skills and
Yeah.
talent. For example, I don't have real talent for sports, so I'm a pretty very normal practitioner of sports. I have no potential at all of being a champion, even if
Yeah.
I train really hard. And
Yeah.
I hope it's not the same for music or for administration, which I believe I have a certain natural talent for that, which I could capitalize on.
Yeah.
But yes, for me, the salt of life is not the ephemerous pleasures that we can get there and there and
Yeah.
become very very quickly boring actually.
Yeah.
But the things that we can, yes, the what really interests me, the experience of life, is the mastery of things and what this mastery can teach us about life in general.
Yeah.
Those very simple lessons that I can get to experience intuitively only doing the same thing for 20 years or more. And the thing I'm most curious about is the effect it has on the human brain.
Mm.
We always say there is a 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
And of course, it depends what you do, because 10,000 hours of piano, you don't get so far with that. If it's 10,000 hours of, I don't know, table tennis, maybe you can be already a local champion.
Yeah.
But I know now. Sometimes I calculate for fun, and I think I'm mostly getting into my 30,000 hours of piano. And
Wow.
I can see how my brain becomes a little bit weird over time because of that. And
In what
this
way?
in a way, for example, kind of partial ambidextrousness.
Mm.
For example, for sports, I'm left-handed for sport, and this is very natural for boxing, for example. I'm completely left-handed, especially in the stress situation. And that's how I truly realized I was left-handed when I was doing heavy sparring, trying to get
Interesting.
really inside the body, and in a very stressful situation. I started to fight as a left-handed, and then I realized, okay, I should train as a left-handed if it's my nature. But I'm right-handed officially. I always write with my left hand, but the rest is like the rest of the body is left-handed. Only the hand is
Interesting.
right-handed. And even because piano playing requires development of the left hand, which is not natural for right-handed guy. And something that are common for professional musicians. We can read in our dreams, for example, because it's proven that the connection between the two parts of the brains is more developed for musicians, things like that, or a kind of a hypermnesia. I don't know if that's a word in English.
Yeah.
But somehow sometimes I meet someone that I met only once in my life 15 years ago, and I can tell him the whole scene, what we lived together for 1 hour. We spoke in that room.
Wow.
Those people were there. This was the decor room. This was exactly what you told me, word for word, during our 5-minute speech. Sometimes I'm able to, and this is the typical pianist memory, which is probably one of the few professions in the world who requires the biggest memory skills in the whole world. And what else? Otherwise, oh yes, we used to say that after 20,000 or 30,000 hours of doing something, the way the brain works when we do that becomes the default models of the brain, which means if I'm not practicing the piano, my brain works like I'm practicing the piano. And when I'm practicing the piano, my brain works almost like normal, just a bit more focused. And I know that when I was 20 years old, to reach to a pianistic goal, for example, I want to learn that piece by heart. I really needed to go through the whole step consciously to become there. And now I know that when I'm practicing, I'm not really going through the whole step. I'm just directing my brain to the work between two practice sessions. And I know that, for example, learning a piece by heart or learning a piece prima vista is much more easy now, because between two working sessions, it's like my brain continued the practice. Actually, it gets to a point where after 30,000 or hours of instrumental practice, we can even practice without the instrument. You can practice with the scores only, or even without the scores.
Wow.
Yes, that becomes really, I can feel that is for real. For example, if I'm really stressed about performance and I don't have the opportunity to practice enough, I can sit in a train and just think of that piece, and that will improve the piece. And that, of course, is not possible if I practice only 10,000 hours. This is something that comes with decades of career. Yes, so cool. And I'm very lucky because I do one of the very few professions in the world who allows the practice of something specific for 30, 40, 50,000 hours in a lifetime. And only we get to experience what is that feeling of. And I strongly believe that it has something energetic in as well, because when we listen to a great pianist on stage playing a very easy music, it can create such a magical atmosphere around him that some amateur pianist plays the same easy music as good as the great pianist. It doesn't have the same effect at all. And I believe that is because of some energetic power of consciousness that just becomes that just improves throughout the years. And and that explains the magic of greatness. And one of the most important lessons I got from this experience is that there is no shortcut, and we can't fake these decades of career.
No.
fake, and letting go of the illusion of being able to fake that, it brings a lot of lightness into life,
Yeah.
and it makes a lot of things possible as well, because we
Yeah.
don't lose our time anymore to try to find those shortcuts who don't exist.
Sure. I think authenticity will always matter. Um, so how do you rest your brain then? You do so many intense focus.
That's another thing I can see with a little bit with myself, for example, in sports, but I could experience that a lot with the champions that I used to meet in my clubs, people
Mhm.
who already have professional fights. I can see that after a certain point of training, the body don't get tired anymore. And
Interesting.
they want to, they can train 10 hours a day and they won't feel tired. Okay, they don't do that because that would destroy their body, and they have to calculate how to be the most efficient possible.
Mm.
And I could practice 12 hours of piano a day without feeling tired as well. I don't do that because that's not efficient.
Yeah.
Efficient is to practice 4 or 5 hours, and so I saw that with my brain with the music. But I know it's actually reachable for any part of any activities in the world after a certain point of practice and getting used to. People don't get tired of that, so it's always good to recreate one's brain while taking a 1 week vacation or not
Yeah.
practice 2 days. But I never need to
Consciously do that.
no, I never need to rest actually because I never feel tired. Sometimes I feel out of touch. I feel that I'm not so focused as I could be. I feel that I start forgetting things, and that's the sign it's time for a weekend, for
Yeah.
example. But the yeah, I never feel the real feeling of tiredness because everything I do on a daily basis are always things I do for 20 years on average. So I'm just used to.
Yeah. That's really cool. And I know you don't make 10-year plans, but what are you looking to accomplish in the next year?
I have these 3 recordings. So
Yeah.
the last 3 CDs of my Ravel box. I have all the concerts who are played already with their programs. I try to, okay, of course, the two things I am supposed to improve a lot because I have the factual occasion to do that is jazz music and Chinese. That's my personal
Yeah.
goals. And yes, that's it. Yeah. What can I
Yeah.
say? Otherwise, just keep on doing what I always did. And
Yeah. Yeah. What advice would you have for young musicians who don't, want to become excellent pianists or excellent violinists, but also want to um, do what you have done in the sense that they want to become stewards and ambassadors of the art form as well?
I think so my rule of success is 3 words, but it's very personal. Is consistence, constance, and conscience.
Mm.
So that's but that's very personal, and for someone else,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
the 3 words would be spontaneity, love, and fun. And so it's very
Yeah.
personal. But the only way to find your personal method is to try and do as much as you can.
Okay.
Because that's a numbers game at the end. It's a numbers game. I tried many different things. I saw what works and what is not working. Everything that I'm still doing now, I'm still doing it because I could see that this was the thing that works. And I
Mm.
started many other things that I gave up because it obviously didn't work.
Sure.
And to find out, you just have to do many things and follow your heart, follow your intuition, work hard so that you don't think it doesn't work because it's not for you. It's not because you didn't try enough.
Yeah.
So do everything that you do as much as you can, and so that you can really find out what works for you. And for every successful person in the world, there is a personal method, and that is not suitable for anyone else in the world.
Sure.
So, and especially an artistic career, this is probably the most the most unpredictable careers that exist in the world. If you want to be a great surgeon, at least you have to understand, you have to start with very long studies and be successful in your studies. And that's the same for everyone in the world. There is no surprise. But to be a very successful artist, some people don't even study in conservatories. Some people are self-taught. Some people get famous when they're very old. Some people are child prodigies. So they're really completely different stories who can be at the extreme of opposite to one another. It's I cannot give precise advice without knowing someone very well and do some mind reading and tell that could be strengths and that could be a weakness. But the only general advice I can give is that you have to do a lot and find out for yourself.
Yeah. Well, I am so excited to follow your career, François, over the next year and decades to come. I think you have such a powerful message for young musicians and people who just have a passion for something. I think the discipline that you manifest in your life is really remarkable and very inspiring for young people, no matter what their chosen field is. So I'm really looking forward to seeing all the things you continue to do.
Thank you very much. It was a great fun to practice my English a little bit.
Absolutely. And safe travels.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy your trip to China, and I'm looking forward for your albums coming out.
Yes, and I'm looking forward for your next podcast. It'll really be very interesting.
Yes. Well, thank you for being so generous with your time. I know I took twice as long as I told you I would, but I feel like there's so many more things I could keep asking you. So
let's do that again.
Yes. Yes. Well, take care, François. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.